The story kicks off with a girl pouring her heart out to Makoto, confessing her deep love for him. But Makoto coldly turned her down with zero emotions, saying it was due to some personal reasons. Crushed, the poor girl burst into tears and ran off, wishing she'd confessed to a TV remote instead. Once she was gone, Makoto turned toward a tree nearby and thanked his teacher, who had been secretly watching the whole thing. He'd asked her to watch the confession from a distance, just to be sure it wasn't some cruel joke being played on him. But the teacher, clearly concerned for his mental state, questioned why Makoto was so suspicious of people. She warned him that if he kept shutting everyone out, he'd never be able to make real friends. Makoto didn't explain himself, he simply thanked her again and walked off. Deep down, he believed as long as he didn't let his emotions get involved, no one could trick or hurt him again. He'd made that vow to himself long ago, after a painful experience he could never forget. It all traced back to years ago in school. Back then, he used to be the class clown, the goofball who made everyone laugh, especially his childhood crush. But one day, while they were out on the playground acting like lovebirds, his childhood crush accidentally tripped on a rock and fell. Suddenly, everyone turned on Makoto, glaring at him in disgust like he was the villain. Someone even claimed they saw him push her. Makoto kept saying it wasn't true, but no one believed him. When he saw that her knee was bleeding, Makoto quickly ran to grab band-aids from his bag. But by the time he got back, his classmates had already taken her to the nurse. The worst part, the rest of his classmates then accused him, brutally, of injuring the girl and then ran off to avoid getting in trouble. From that day forward, Makoto became the class outcast. Rumors spread like wildfire, labeling him as a troublemaker. No one gave him a chance to explain, but just kept bad-mouthing him. Makoto had held onto a small hope that his family at least would have his back, but even that hope shattered. The moment his mom heard he had allegedly hurt a girl, she immediately called the girl's mother and forced Makoto to apologize, without even hearing his side. With no friends and no family to rely on, Makoto sank into a deep sense of isolation. He came to the painful conclusion that no one would ever believe him, so he shut down and stopped talking to everyone. When he got to higher school, Makoto found comfort in the quiet corners of the library as a way to escape everything. That's where he started noticing Sidhu, a quiet girl who also spent a lot of time there. One afternoon, he spotted her phone left behind on a desk. Without thinking twice, he picked it up and went to return it. Sidhu thanked him sincerely, and from that small moment, a genuine friendship started to form. For the first time in a long while, Makoto thought he finally had a friend, but once again, tragedy struck. A misunderstanding led to Makoto being accused of attacking Sidhu in the library. And just like before, no one asked him what really happened, and by the end of the day, he was once again completely alone. Not long after the mess with Sidhu, another girl named Kisaragi suddenly approached Makoto. Despite all the awful rumors floating around about him, she asked if he would be her boyfriend. She smiled innocently and said she believed in him. She even suggested they hang out over the weekend. And Makoto, finally feeling hopeful that someone actually trusted him, agreed to the date. But when the day came, Makoto was met with a cruel twist. The whole thing had been a setup, a twisted prank cooked up by some boys in his class, with Kisaragi playing along for laughs. Her sweet confession had only been part of a punishment game, and Makoto had walked right into it. The tiny bit of his heart that hadn't broken after the incident with Sidhu was now completely crushed. Still, Makoto forced himself to keep going. He deleted Kisaragi's number and buried the pain. But even when he shut his heart away, misfortune kept finding him. A few weeks passed, and this time, a new girl with a charming smile named Nanako unexpectedly came into the picture. Although her friends warned her that Makoto was nothing but trouble, Nanako genuinely didn't seem to care. One day, she invited him to join her group for a karaoke hangout. Since it wasn't a one-on-one thing, Makoto decided to go, thinking she would be different. But the moment they got there, her friends started mocking him, laughing that he'd actually believed Nanako would ever hang out with a toxic loser like him. The whole thing had been another setup. Makoto stood there in silence, humiliated. He wasn't even angry at them anymore. He was just mad at himself for being stupid enough to hope. When Makoto entered senior high, he was stunned to spot a familiar face from his past, his childhood crush, Shizuka. She wasn't the shy little girl he remembered. She'd grown into a full-blown baddie. But Makoto had learned his lesson the hard way. He wasn't about to get caught up in old feelings, or let any girl mess with his peace again, so he kept his distance. Despite this, Shizuka followed him home one afternoon after school and casually brought up how gloomy and distant he seemed, and how he didn't seem to have any friends. She offered to be his friend and suggested they let bygones be bygones, claiming she never believed the rumors about him were true. When she said she had always believed in him, Makoto's expression turned cold. Her sudden kindness didn't sit right with him, and he questioned, why now? Shizuka explained that they'd been in different classes, and that she'd always wanted to reach out but didn't have the courage back then. Makoto, however, wasn't moved by her sweet words and simply told her to stay the heck away from him. That's when she grabbed his hand, smiling nervously, and joked about how he used to simp so hard for her. But Makoto wasn't laughing. He bluntly told her it was too late. He said if she truly trusted him, she should have stood by him when it actually mattered. Shizuka, stunned by his words, tried to say something, but before she could, Makoto had already walked through his front door. Just as he entered, he met his sister Haruka at the door, who asked if he'd been with Shizuka. Makoto just apologized for coming home late and said he was heading to his room. Even at home, his gloom and distrust were obvious. Haruka watched him leave silently, then muttered that he used to be so much brighter and happier. But Makoto didn't say a word. He just kept walking. Right then, his mother popped out and suggested they go out to celebrate his first day of school, hoping a family dinner would cheer him up. Makoto declined, telling them to enjoy the evening without him, and then retreated to his room. Once alone in his room, Makoto noticed he had 2 new messages. With so much time spent alone, Makoto had taken up writing light novels as a hobby, one of the few ways he could drown out his misery. One message was a passionate review from a fan about his latest Ice Guy novel, while the other was from his editor, informing him that a publishing company was interested in his work. Despite the exciting opportunity, the thought of stepping out into the world and facing people felt more exhausting than exciting. So Makoto locked his tab and tried to act like he never saw the message at all. The next morning, Makoto dragged himself out of bed, sleep-deprived because he couldn't stop thinking about the publishing offer. By the time he arrived at school, he was totally worn out. As he slouched at his desk, trying to stay conscious, he noticed the blonde girl next to him, Shinazuka. Quiet, reserved, and always alone. Just like him, she too had a poor reputation among their classmates. Suddenly, another girl walked up to Makoto with a smile and asked if she could eat lunch with him. Makoto immediately turned her down coldly, memories of Nanako and all the fake kindness still fresh in his mind. When the girl insisted on chatting, he shut it down with a quiet excuse, saying he wanted to read. Then he turned to Shinazuka and asked if he could borrow the book she was holding. Shinazuka, surprised, slowly handed it over without a word. As he took the book, Makoto felt something strange, a flicker of unfamiliar warmth. It was the first time in ages he had willingly reached out to someone. Even he wasn't sure why he felt drawn to Shinazuka. Later that day, Makoto and his stepsister Haruka walked home from school together. Makoto carried a bag of groceries, his mind drifting as he thought about why he'd talked to Shinazuka earlier. It wasn't like him, and he couldn't figure out what made him do it. As they walked, he suddenly spotted Shinazuka on the other side of the road, completely focused on her phone and smiling at something on the screen. Haruka noticed her too and immediately mocked her, saying there goes the delinquent, before commenting on Shinazuka's weird smile. It seemed Shinazuka heard her because she walked past them with an angry squint, leaving Makoto wondering about the meaning behind her expression. Once Shinazuka was out of earshot, Haruka kept criticizing her for being a delinquent in this age, and how lame it was. Makoto muttered something in response, but Haruka didn't quite catch it. She suddenly paused, then asked Makoto why they had drifted apart as siblings. She admitted she used to feel jealous when he chose to play with Shizuka instead of her. Makoto stayed silent, remembering how painful it was when Haruka believed all the rumors about him and never seemed to care how much it hurt him. Haruka confessed that her past judgments about him were wrong, admitting she'd unfairly believed the bad rumors. But when Haruka claimed she'd always been the only one who believed in him, Makoto's frustration boiled over, and he asked her to stop calling him older brother. He insisted that what's done is done, then excused himself, saying he needed to put away the groceries before they spoiled. Later that day, Makoto went back to writing. He received an email from one of his regular fans, a girl named Pamiko. She wrote about how his novels had helped her through tough times, saying she was a gloomy person herself. Messages from Pamiko were one of the few things that genuinely made Makoto. The next morning, on his way to school, Makoto spotted Shizuka waiting at the school gate with another girl. He tried to walk past without making eye contact, but Shizuka called out to him, saying she needed to talk. Her friend jumped in right away, introducing herself as Momo and stressing that Shizuka really wanted to have this conversation. Tears welled up in Shizuka's eyes as she begged Makoto to let go of the past, insisting that all she wanted was to watch a movie with him and cheer him up. Makoto stayed silent. Seeing her friend so upset, Momo hugged Shizuka then snapped at Makoto. She called him a weirdo and yelled that, after everything, Shizuka still liked him, even though he looked like a dork. Annoyed by their persistence, Makoto realized that being polite wasn't working, so he decided it was time to be blunt. Before he could say anything, Shizuka suddenly pushed past them, telling everyone to get out of the way with their drama. Momo, surprised, reminded Shizuka that they used to be friends, but Shizuka quickly fired back, asking if Momo really had the nerve to call her that now. Momo tried to remind her how close the three of them used to be and begged her to stop pretending to be a delinquent. When Momo insisted she had always believed in Shizuka, both Makoto and Shizuka's faces went cold. Shizuka insulted Momo and looked ready to go off, but Makoto stepped between them, asking her to calm down. Then he turned to Shizuka and Momo and asked if they had ever gone through unfair rumors or been betrayed by someone they trusted. He told them all he wanted was to be left alone, and it was too late to undo the damage that had already been done. Hearing this, Shizuka burst into tears and ran away, while Shinazuka just looked away in annoyance. Shortly afterwards, during class, Makoto noticed Shinazuka smiling at her phone and guessed she must be reading a weblight novel. Suddenly, she started typing furiously, which reminded Makoto to check his own phone, wondering if he had received another message from Pamiko, his fan. Not long after, a notification popped up. Pamiko had left another positive comment about his latest chapter. Happy she was still reading, Makoto decided to reply later, after finishing some more writing. Shinazuka glanced his way, then went back to typing and accidentally dropped her phone. When Makoto spotted the Pomeranian dog sticker on the back of Shinazuka's phone, everything suddenly made sense. Pamiko, the fan who always cheered him on, was actually Shinazuka. Makoto tried to convince himself it was impossible for Shinazuka to be Pamiko, but when she casually mentioned his online pen name, Makoto's heart started pounding 1,000,000 beats per second. He broke out in a sweat, unable to believe the strange coincidence. Right then, the teacher walked into the classroom and called everyone to order for homeroom. For his own peace of mind, Makoto decided he would just delete Pamiko's message and pretend none of this was happening. But as the day dragged on, he realized he couldn't do it. No matter how much he wanted to erase the message, he just couldn't bring himself to go through with it. The thought alone made him feel sick and restless every time he held his phone. Makoto glanced over at Shinazuka and sensed a heavy, intimidating vibe around her. He guessed that she acted tough on purpose, just to keep other people away. In the end, Makoto made up his mind to stop thinking about Shinazuka at all, hoping it would finally calm him down. At the end of class, the teacher announced there would be a school trip soon and told everyone to hurry up and form groups with their friends. As soon as the bell rang, Makoto grabbed his things and made for the door. Shinazuka looked like she wanted to say something, but before she could open her mouth, Makoto was already gone. Annoyed, Shinazuka kicked her desk in frustration. Just outside the classroom, Sidu caught up with Makoto, having watched everything unfold. Sidu was the same girl from the library incident at Makoto's old school, but now she'd changed. She dyed her hair blonde and had a new, more confident look. Like every other girl from his past, Sidu tried to start a conversation, but Makoto kept his distance, not even slowing down as he headed home. Sidu followed him, telling him that their time together in the library meant a lot to her, and that he might have even been her first love. She admitted the trouble from back then was all her fault and insisted on reconnecting, ignoring Makoto's clear attempts to brush her off. She said she'd learned from romance games that mistakes could be fixed with enough effort, and even put on her old glasses to try and win him over with nostalgia. But Makoto wasn't moved. The memories meant nothing to him now. He just felt empty inside. Suddenly, Makoto received a notification on his phone. As he pulled out his phone to check, Sidu assumed he was about to take a picture of her in the cute glasses. But instead, Makoto simply checked his inbox and saw a new message from Pamiko, saying she was excited to read his next chapter. Lost in the warmth of the message, Makoto completely ignored Sidhu and headed home, his thoughts now centered on Pamiko, or rather Shinazuka. For the first time in a long while, Makoto felt a genuine sense of happiness, even if it was just because of a fan. He realized that if he quit writing now, he'd feel like he was letting someone down, knowing there was at least one person waiting eagerly for his next chapter. Unsure if he'd ever finish the whole story, Makoto promised himself he would write at least one more installment. That day at home, Makoto's mother asked if he wanted to join her and Haruka on a shopping trip, but Makoto said he already had plans to meet a friend. Haruka was excited and ready to go, but when Makoto kept insisting about meeting this friend, their mother got annoyed and told him to stop living in the past and grow up. Makoto found her comment almost funny, since she'd gone shopping with Haruka plenty of times without him, even skipping his graduation once. He didn't expect her to suddenly change now. Standing his ground, Makoto repeated that he was meeting a friend and started getting ready to leave. Haruka looked disappointed and asked if he could skip seeing this invisible friend and come with them instead, but Makoto ignored her and headed out, not looking back even as she called after him at the door. Knowing his mom and Haruka would probably head to the new mall, Makoto decided to visit an older shopping center where he could be alone. When he reached the food court, he was relieved to see it almost empty. For once, he finally felt at peace, comfortable enough to write without any disturbance. But by some odd coincidence, Makoto noticed Shinazuka sitting all the way at the other end, her eyes glued to her phone. He quietly wondered what she was up to, watching as her expressions shifted, sometimes blushing, sometimes smiling, clearly lost in whatever she was reading. After a while, she stopped scrolling and started typing on her phone. Curious, Makoto checked his phone for any messages and saw that Shinazuka had just posted a new chapter of her own novel online. He was stunned. Not only was she a writer too, but her story was also about to be published, even though she hadn't updated it in a year. Right then, he got a new message from her, complimenting his latest chapter. Feeling brave, Makoto went to buy 2 orange juices and walked over to her table. At first, Shinazuka snapped at him, thinking he was just some random loser trying to hit on her. But when she looked up and saw it was Makoto, she froze in shock. When Makoto sat down across from Shinazuka, she tried to ask if they could be friends, but he cut her off right away. He told her straight up that he didn't want to be friends with her. Annoyed, Shinazuka snapped back, pointing out that while she had some bad rumors about her, none were as damaging as his, and then told him to just leave her alone. Makoto was caught off guard for a second, realizing that his own reputation might be even worse than he thought. Still, he shrugged and said he didn't care about the rumors, since nobody really knew the truth anyway. Shinazuka replied that he should just stay out of her business, saying she didn't want to get mixed up with anyone anymore. The rumors surrounding Shinazuka were all pretty nasty. Stories about dating sugar daddies, extorting classmates, violence, sneaking out at night, and more. In fact, she was considered the real trap queen of the ghetto. Even so, Makoto said rumors were just made-up stories, and offered her one of the orange juices he brought. Shinazuka snatched the drink from his hand, making it clear she didn't trust any acts of kindness. When Makoto tried to grab her arm to stop her from tossing the drink away, it ended up spilling all over his clothes. Seeing the mess, Shinazuka quickly apologized, but then got defensive, saying he was rude first, so the mess was just as much his fault as hers. Frustrated, Shinazuka demanded to know what Makoto wanted from her, since it was clear he hadn't sat down for a friendly chat. After thinking it over, Makoto admitted he'd rather not be friends with her, not because of her bad reputation, but because he was scared that if he trusted someone again, he'd just end up hurt. Shinazuka made it clear she didn't want to be friends either, and told him to go kiss Truck-kun. To break the tension, Makoto switched topics and asked Shinazuka why she had stopped writing her novel. Shinazuka instantly became flustered and wanted to know how he had figured that out. Before he could answer, she mentioned that he was actually Nianta, his online pen name, and then scolded him for always making his stories so tragic, with so many characters dying. She admitted his stories really got to her, and told him he should care more about his characters. Even so, she said she'd let him off the hook, mainly because she liked the cute heroine in his story. Makoto listened quietly, and when she finished, he asked if he could read her work. Shinazuka was embarrassed at first, but finally agreed, warning him not to bother with her old stories because they were mostly just essays. Still, Makoto checked them out and found them pretty funny, especially since most of them were sappy romance tales. Despite their awkward start, the two of them ended up bonding over their love of novels, talking and laughing together until evening. Just then, Shinizuka's stomach growled, letting Makoto know she hadn't eaten lunch. Makoto also realized he was hungry, but he hadn't enjoyed such a fun, long talk, especially with a girl in ages. He then suggested they grab a bite before heading home since it was already getting late. But when he noticed Shinizuka hesitating, he asked why she didn't want to go back. Reluctantly, Shinizuka admitted she didn't get along with her family, saying they were annoying and, in her words, way too trusting. Suddenly, Shinizuka's older sister, Seiko, showed up in the food court to pick her up. As soon as she spotted Shinizuka, she wrapped her in a big hug. When Seiko noticed Makoto, she immediately asked if they were friends. Both Makoto and Shinizuka denied it right away. Seiko didn't seem to care and was just happy to see her sister hanging out with someone her age. When Makoto introduced himself as Shinizuka's classmate, Seiko teased that he was so cute, just like the anime protagonist Shinizuka always talked about. As Shinizuka stood to leave, Seiko suggested they stay a little longer since she was tired from work and hadn't eaten yet. But Shinizuka quickly turned her down, insisting they go. While saying goodbye, Shinizuka accidentally called Makoto Nianta his online pen name, which made Seiko's eyes widen. She instantly recognized it as the name of the well-known web novelist who wrote isekai stories. Shinizuka tried to change the subject, but Seiko wouldn't let it drop. Full of excitement, Seiko leaned over and asked Makoto why he hadn't replied to her messages. She revealed she was actually the editor who had been trying to get in touch about his work, wanting to meet up. Makoto was shocked. Seiko mentioned she'd been waiting for his answer about the serialization offer. She joked that Shinizuka should have mentioned knowing Makoto, but Shinizuka repeated that they weren't actually friends. Soon after, Seiko and Shinizuka left the food court together, with Seiko promising to talk to Makoto about the book deal another time since it was already late. Seiko said it was destiny she'd come to pick up her little sister that day, but Shinizuka just looked annoyed walking ahead. As Makoto watched the two sisters go, he couldn't help but notice how different they were. Seiko was friendly and outgoing, the total opposite of her prickly younger sister. Shinizuka still found it surprising that her older sister was Makoto's editor. Makoto, however, secretly worried that Shinizuka might have used her family ties to get his story published faster. As if sensing his thoughts, Shinizuka quickly assured him that she hadn't used any connections to help him. She admitted shyly that she'd read many of his stories and genuinely believed they were good enough to be published. She really meant what she said. Seiko, trying to ease the awkwardness, teased that she could already see the two of them were friends, even if they didn't know it yet. Shinizuka immediately denied it, and Makoto wasn't even sure himself what to call their relationship. Suddenly, Makoto froze in shock when he saw Shizuka and Sita nearby. As soon as he spotted them, he quickly turned away to leave, but they chased after him, desperate to apologize. Makoto didn't want to hear their excuses, which made them burst into tears. Their crying disgusted him. He knew a simple sorry could never undo the pain they'd caused. Just then, Shinizuka gently placed a hand on Makoto's shoulder and smoothly changed the subject to something random, guiding him away from the two girls. Relieved, Makoto laughed, appreciating her quick thinking. Without realizing it, he linked arms with her. Seiko joined them playfully, and together they walked away, leaving Shizuka and Sita shocked as they watched Makoto surrounded by new female friends. Standing helplessly, the girls could only cry, realizing they'd missed their chance to make things right. Once they were far enough away, Makoto quietly thanked Shinizuka, calling her by her online name, Pamiko. He was grateful to her for helping him escape all that drama, even if just for now. Meanwhile, as they approached Makoto's house, Haruka peeked through the window. Seeing her brother with Shinizuka and Seiko, she finally realized he hadn't been lying when he said he had friends. Over the next week, Makoto and Shinizuka kept messaging each other every day through the online novel platform, slowly getting closer. For now, they maintained their writer and reader relationship, bonded by their mutual love of stories. Soon after, in class, their teacher announced it was finally time to form groups for the upcoming class trip. Immediately, everyone jumped from their seats, rushing to team up with friends or classmates they liked. Makoto already knew he, and probably Shinizuka too, would be left out since they were known as class loners. Annoyed by the whole scene, Shinizuka suddenly stood up and marched right over to the blackboard. The class stared at her in shock as she picked up the chalk and wrote both her and Makoto's names on the board. She announced loudly that it would just be the two of them, adding that since they were both outcasts anyway, nobody would mind. She bluntly said she just wanted to get the activity over with, so she could go home. The teacher didn't object, so Shinizuka walked back to her seat. As she sat down, she casually warned Makoto not to get the wrong idea. This didn't mean they were friends. She insisted again that she wasn't trying to be close to him or anything and just wanted this over quickly. Makoto just shrugged and said, whatever. But deep inside, they both felt a new connection growing. Even if they weren't exactly friends, there was no doubt about their bond, as Pamiko and Nianta. A few hours into the day, Makoto asked Shinizuka why she had chosen to be in a group with him. She explained it was better than being forced into a group with people she disliked, especially since those people probably disliked her just as much. Makoto admitted she had a good point. Shinizuka then told him he should speak more honestly, but Makoto quickly switched the topic, saying he didn't feel like discussing school. Shinizuka agreed and instead asked about his next chapter, wondering if he'd considered publishing it. Makoto replied that he had finished writing it and it just needed some final editing, but as for publishing, he wasn't sure. He felt honored that someone wanted to publish a novel he'd written as a hobby, but he worried it might cause trouble at home due to his age. Seeing his quiet anxiety, Shinizuka reassured him there was no need to rush. Clearly, he had a lot to think about. She reminded him gently, though, that his meeting with Seiko was the day after tomorrow. With a slight smile, she added that despite Seiko's carefree appearance, her sister was extremely serious about her work, so serious she'd never even had a boyfriend. Makoto was surprised to hear that. When Makoto commented that Shinizuka must really look up to her older sister, Shinizuka blushed and tried to brush it off, saying it was just family loyalty. The mention of family brought Makoto's thoughts to his own father, who'd been overseas for years. Noticing Makoto's mood sinking, Shinizuka quickly suggested they have a light novel writing contest. Each would write a short 500-word story about the upcoming field trip, and Seiko would judge the winner. Makoto agreed. Shinizuka finished first and proudly boasted about her fast writing speed. Makoto calmly reminded her that being fast didn't mean it was good. Shinizuka snapped at him, telling him to shut up, then exchanged phones so they could read each other's stories. As Makoto read Shinizuka's story, he felt unexpectedly moved, nearly tearing up. Seeing his reaction, Shinizuka smugly asked if her writing had touched him. Makoto smiled warmly and admitted it did, praising her talent. Hearing this, Shinizuka's grin widened and she blushed deeply. The next morning, Makoto skipped breakfast as usual and headed toward the front door. He paused there for a moment, recalling all the harsh comments his mother had made over the years, words from his childhood that still hurt. His mother noticed him standing by the door and asked if something was wrong. Makoto stayed quiet, worried that she wouldn't approve of his upcoming book publication since he was still a student. Deciding not to share anything just yet, he simply said, "It's nothing," and left quietly. His sister Haruka wished him a nice day, but he didn't reply. At school, Makoto and Shinizuka were called into the teacher's office. Although both immediately insisted they weren't friends, the teacher assured them she wasn't there to scold them. Instead, she gently reminded them that apart from family, she was also available if they ever needed advice. She encouraged them to consider making at least one trustworthy friend, someone they'd feel comfortable forgiving if trust was ever broken. Makoto and Shinizuka, both having experienced betrayal from supposed friends, were skeptical. The teacher hinted she'd also faced betrayal, but encouraged them not to give up completely. Neither Makoto nor Shinizuka fully grasped her point, but they exchanged thoughtful glances. With that, she dismissed them back to class. On their way back, Shinizuka openly wondered what exactly the teacher was trying to say, though Makoto didn't fully get it either. Before they could talk more, a girl suddenly approached Makoto. She said she'd always wanted to speak with him, but Makoto didn't recognize her right away and asked who she was. Shocked and hurt, the girl revealed she was Kisaragi, the girl behind the fake confession. Her hair was shorter now and she appeared thinner, but Makoto finally remembered her. Realizing Shinizuka was waiting, Makoto tried to quickly end the conversation, but Kisaragi begged him to listen. She confessed she'd been pressured into the prank, scared she'd lose her friends if she refused. She insisted her feelings for Makoto were real and asked if they could start fresh. Normally, Makoto would have shut this down immediately, but to his own surprise, he started asking her questions. He felt uneasy that this was happening right in front of Shinazuka. Just as Makoto was about to change the subject, Kisaragi made her boldest move yet, inviting him on a date that weekend. Before Makoto could answer, Kisaragi burst into tears and tried to hug him. That was the last straw for Shinazuka. She stepped in between them, firmly telling Kisaragi that Makoto was busy working on their field trip project. Annoyed, Kisaragi snapped at Shinazuka, telling her to stay out of it, but Shinazuka calmly replied that Kisaragi was the one interrupting. Shinazuka then told her to leave, grabbed Makoto's hand, and pulled him away. Makoto was surprised by how protective Shinazuka was acting, almost like a possessive girlfriend, but he followed without protest. Looking back, he saw Kisaragi glaring at them angrily before they walked out of sight. After walking a short distance, Shinazuka lightly reminded Makoto he'd be late for his meeting with Seiko if he kept getting distracted. Noticing Makoto staring blankly at his hand, Shinazuka jokingly asked if she needed to hold his hand again. Laughing, she teased him. But when Makoto playfully replied that it would only make her blush more, Shinazuka playfully threatened him with her fist, daring him to repeat himself. In a flashback to their school graduation, Shizuka had happily approached Makoto to congratulate him and start a conversation. But Makoto answered coldly and quickly walked away. Shizuka called after him, begging him to wait, but he never looked back and just kept going. Confused by his sudden coldness, she decided to wait until senior school, thinking that since they'd be at the same school, she'd get another chance. Back in the present, Shizuka, Haruka, and Sita met at a downtown cafe, gossiping like bored old grannies about the strange new connection between Makoto and Shinazuka. Shizuka shared how she and Situ had recently seen Makoto hanging out with Shinazuka and Seiko. Situ admitted that Shinazuka was attractive and even felt a bit jealous of her smooth skin. The girls speculated about what kind of person Shinazuka might be, especially given the awful rumors surrounding her. Situ summed it up: everyone in class deemed Shinazuka a delinquent loner. Yet seeing how casually she'd been chatting with Makoto that evening, they agreed she clearly had become his friend, which was one heck of a surprise. Haruka entered the conversation by sharing that she remembered Kisaragi had once searched for her brother, though she hadn't taken it seriously at first. Shizuka added that she'd heard a rumor that Kisaragi and Makoto had once been very close friends. Haruka then remarked that, although Kisaragi looked kind of plain, she was a real slay queen and very popular with the boys. The conversation drifted to Nanako, but as Haruka was about to say something about her, the girls agreed that neither Nanako nor Kisaragi was relevant to their current discussion. Changing the subject, Haruka shared a detail from that morning. Makoto had been kinder than usual, and even accepted the kusamachi she'd given him. Seeing the puzzled looks on Shizuka and Sairu, Haruka clarified that Makoto wasn't as cold or scary as he used to be. She speculated this sudden change might have something to do with Shinazuka. Suddenly, what started as light gossip quickly turned into an emotional roller coaster, as the three girls acknowledged their feelings for Makoto and the terrible mistakes they'd made in the past. Shizuka went first, sharing exactly what happened back in first grade on the playground. While she was busy nursing her own injury, she didn't realize everyone was blaming Makoto for her fall. She wanted to clear things up and say she just tripped, but the tension made her freeze, and she couldn't get the words out. Shizuka explained how those early moments can shape a kid's whole personality, and being unfairly blamed had left a deep mark on Makoto. She'd always worried that, because of it, he'd stay distant and alone through school. Her guilt pushed her to want to tell the truth to everyone, but she was scared everyone would turn on her instead and hate her for it, so she kept quiet. She'd hoped to fix things once they hit senior school, but when she finally tried, she learned life wasn't that easy. Since then, she chose silence. Haruka, moved by Shizuka's confession, admitted she'd heard about the playground incident too, and how Makoto's classmates had cruelly thrown pebbles at him and even smashed his stuff, just because they thought he'd hurt Shizuka. Haruka said that when she told her friends, they painted Makoto as a violent kid who only behaved at home. They called him two-faced, and even guessed his anger came from not being Haruka's mama's real son. Shaken by their comments, that evening Haruka went home and told their mother that Makoto had hit a girl. Haruka admitted she'd even tweaked the story when she told her mom, feeling hurt that Makoto spent so much time with Shizuka while she felt ignored. She thought that causing a little drama and then showing kindness would get Makoto to notice her more, but it backfired. By the time Haruka realized her mistake, Makoto treated her like a stranger, answering her with cold distance. Now looking back, she wished she'd just been kind to him from the start. Sito, the quiet library girl, reflected on her own mistake. At first she believed the rumor that Makoto had attacked her, even though deep down she felt he wouldn't. On graduation day, she learned from an anonymous source that Makoto had actually jumped to protect her from falling books during an earthquake. She remembered the tremor, but only saw Makoto lunging toward her, so she cried out that he'd attacked her. Her dramatic claim grabbed everyone's attention. Classmates rushed to comfort her. For a shy girl unused to the spotlight, she loved the attention so much that she never asked Makoto's side of the story. That incident made her super popular. She started dressing stylishly, turned down tons of admirers, and enjoyed school life, forgetting all about the attack. Haruka even recalled how many admirers confessed to Sito afterward, but she rejected them all because, in her eyes, no one was as cool as Makoto. Later, after Sito found out the truth about that day in the library, she bumped into Makoto by chance. Seeing him brought back memories of the happy times they shared among the bookshelves. She realized she'd liked him all along. At graduation, she desperately tried to talk to him, but Makoto didn't even look back. That's when she finally understood the damage she'd caused. She tried to make things right in senior school, but by then it was too late. After these heartfelt confessions, Shizuka, Haruka, and Sito felt deep regret for what they'd done and started thinking about how to earn Makoto's forgiveness. They knew a direct apology wouldn't mean much since Makoto wasn't ready to open up. Shizuka suggested they stop apologizing and instead help Makoto become the kind person he once was. Haruka agreed, saying that face-to-face apologies might just make things worse. Instead, she proposed supporting Shinazuka, the girl who had actually reached Makoto's heart. Shizuka and Sito hesitated, still holding feelings for Makoto, but realized this was their best shot at making a positive difference from afar. So they decided to nurture the bond between Shinazuka and Makoto and clear any obstacles in their way, especially Kisaragi and Nanako. With the school trip coming up, they agreed to start their plan there. Despite the reasons that brought them together, the three girls felt united and determined to finally set things right. Diving into his thoughts, Makoto remembered how earlier that day, his stepsister Haruka had given him a kusamachi. When they were little, he'd always pretended to like it, even though it disgusted him just to make her happy. Back then, he'd felt compelled to protect her whenever she called him elder brother. But now, that protective urge was completely gone. It was the same with Shizuka. They used to be inseparable because she always followed him around. Though things had warmed a bit lately, Makoto felt nothing special towards her anymore. Sito, too, always wore a pained expression whenever he ignored her. She'd forgiven the rumors and showed him nothing but kindness, yet Makoto's heart stayed colder than Sub-Zero's fart nozzle. Don't get him wrong, Makoto didn't hold grudges, nor did he dislike any of them. He simply didn't think about them anymore. Trust felt impossible, and no matter what anyone said, his heart remained numb. No feeling, no emotion. Simply put, Makoto was broken. Currently, Makoto sat in Seiko's office alongside Seiko and Shinazuka, about to speak with his father via video call about publishing his novel. Although Makoto had arranged the call, he wasn't convinced his father would really make time. When the call began, Makoto was extremely formal, speaking to his father as a grown man rather than as a boy. He explained clearly and firmly that his novel had done well, and he was being offered an opportunity to publish it as a book. Summoning all the courage he could muster, Makoto openly shared his ambitions, and his father listened attentively. To Makoto's surprise, his father responded warmly. He agreed to accompany Makoto to the contractual negotiations, explaining that there were many dishonest publishers in the city, and as Makoto wasn't yet an adult, he'd need a guardian for such an important decision. Makoto thanked him, and his father gently told him not to be formal, proudly saying Makoto had always been his pride and joy. Hearing this deeply touched Makoto. After the emotional call ended, Seiko eagerly asked Makoto if he was ready to proceed with the official talks. She expressed how much she wanted to publish his story and sought his approval to move forward. Shinazuka was visibly fidgeting, anxiously awaiting Makoto's response. She admitted that seeing Makoto's story published would inspire her to work even harder as a writer. After several moments of silent contemplation, Makoto finally made up his mind. Even if at that, for once he needed to be selfish. With genuine enthusiasm, he declared that he wanted Seiko to publish his story as a book. The emotional weight of this defining moment overwhelmed him, and tears began to stream down his face. Noticing Makoto's emotion, Shinazuka immediately stood up and silently leaned in behind him, offering quiet but powerful support. Through his tears, Makoto thanked them both, confessing that if it weren't for Shinazuka, he might never have the courage to pursue something important to himself. Even Makoto's father, still present on the video call, was stunned to witness his son displaying so much raw emotion. Later that cold night, as Makoto left Seiko's office, Shinakuza and Seiko waved him goodbye. When he finally arrived home, he noticed his mother waiting at the door just as he stepped inside. When she asked why he hadn't told her about the book, Makoto guessed his father must have already informed her. So he apologized for not telling her sooner, but his mother assured him it was fine and it was good news. She said she just wanted to make sure the publishing company was legitimate. In response, Makoto bowed his head and promised he wouldn't cause her any trouble. He pleaded that he really wanted this and was willing to do whatever she wanted in return. He vowed he'd go to a good university and get a good job, if that was what it took to get his published. Seeing the mix of desperation and sadness in his eyes, his stepmother grew nervous. She quickly blurted out that all she had in mind was to celebrate with a meal together with Haruka, but Makoto politely declined. Disappointed, his mother asked why he had chosen to consult his father, who was far away, about the publishing before coming to her, who was right there. Makoto tried to explain himself. He said he didn't think his mother would believe in him and feared the publishing talks would fall apart if he involved her. He admitted there was no way she would understand his dreams and aspirations. His mother tried to defend herself, but Makoto wasn't ready to stop. This was his moment. He reminded her that even back then in his younger school days, she had never believed his side of the story, hadn't even really listened. She insisted she had, claiming her way of handling things was meant to teach him the right way. But Makoto disagreed. To him, it felt like she only supported him when things went her way. He told her he'd become cold-hearted because no one had ever truly believed in him. When his stepmother broke down in tears, Makoto apologized and said it would be better if he left the house than cause her any more pain. His mother cried and apologized for the past, but even that didn't soften Makoto's cold heart. Haruka suddenly rushed in, tearfully begging Makoto not to leave and not to be separated from her. Then composing herself, she said that if living apart would make him happier, then maybe he should go. She admitted their mother was too fussy anyway, and perhaps living alone would help. She suggested he could stay at their grandpa's now empty place, though he'd need their dad's permission. Their mother objected, insisting Makoto was the son she was proud of and begging him not to go. But Haruka gently made her understand that Makoto no longer trusted them because of how he'd been treated, though maybe someday things could change. Comforting their sobbing mother, Haruka told Makoto to leave, promising she'd take care of their mom. With tears choking her voice, she asked him to go peacefully without worry. Seeing his little sister cry so bitterly, Makoto wondered when he'd last seen Haruka like this. He gently patted her on the head, admitting he didn't fully understand his own feelings, but thanked her anyway. Haruka, still crying, forced a smile and said, no matter how hard it was, she wanted to send him off with a smile. Makoto, on the other hand, wondered what kind of person he had become, watching his stepsister force a smile through tears while he felt nothing at all. The next morning, Makoto left home and headed for school. Along the way, he bumped into Shinazuka, who noticed he looked even more tired than usual. Makoto agreed, mentioning that a lot had happened the previous day. As Shinazuka was about to continue towards school, Makoto stopped her and asked if he could join her. Shinazuka hesitated at first, worried that walking together would make Makoto's bad reputation even worse. But Makoto shrugged it off, saying he didn't care about any silly rumors, he just wanted to walk with her today. His honest words made Shinazuka blush, and eventually she agreed to let him accompany her. As they walked, Makoto wondered why she was wearing glasses. A sudden flashback followed. Makoto's stepmother handed him the keys to his grandfather's old house, along with all the money he'd saved up. She admitted she wasn't ready for him to leave, but felt she owed him at least that much because she'd caused him pain. She promised she'd talk with his father, hoping that someday they could reunite and confront him together. Until then, she asked him to eat well, sleep well, clean up after himself, and spend his money wisely, though she didn't have to worry since Makoto had always been good at those things. As Makoto prepared to leave, his stepmother assured him that if he ever needed help, he was always welcome to return to her. And just like that, without much warning or fanfare, Makoto revealed to Shinazuka that he was now a lonely bachelor. When Shinazuka heard about it, she remarked that Makoto was pretty lucky to be living on his own. But then she pointed out that even if he claimed to have moved in unprepared, at least the house was already furnished with his grandpa's stuff. Makoto agreed, though he mentioned he still needed to buy a few things. Shinazuka accepted that and volunteered to help him shop. When Makoto admitted he never expected things to turn out this way, Shinazuka gently reassured him, suggesting his stepmother probably needed time to reflect. Once the pressure from his publishing calmed down, she promised, he might actually enjoy living on his own. Suddenly, Shinazuka fell silent. Makoto asked what was wrong, and after a brief pause, she hesitantly asked if living alone meant he wouldn't be hanging around the food court anymore. Makoto realized he'd gone there mainly to avoid home, but now that he was a big boy with his own crib, he didn't need to anymore. Besides, the food court was basically where guys went to hit on girls, not exactly ideal for writing. So Makoto invited Shinazuka over to his place for their writing sessions instead. Shinazuka immediately blushed, clearly flustered by the suggestion, and quickly clarified that she didn't ask because she'd miss him or anything. Still, she admitted the food court wasn't great for writing and said it'd be nice to have a quieter place to work. As she spoke, Makoto thought about how he didn't really want to leave her alone either. Still blushing, Shinazuka asked if he was sure she wouldn't be bothering him by coming over to his shack, reminding him they weren't even exactly friends or anything. Makoto simply nodded and said he knew, but she could come if she wanted to write. When they finally reached school, Makoto turned to her in class and asked if she could also feel the weird vibes in the room. Shinazuka nodded and noted that everyone seemed to be staring at them. Makoto quickly blamed her stupid, nerdy glasses, but Shinazuka fired back, saying it was probably because he wasn't wearing his usual creepy, Pennywise smile. The two glanced around and realized just how many eyes were on them, with classmates whispering and staring like hawks. Under that spotlight, Shinazuka sighed and said there was no way she could read the latest chapter of Makoto's novel like this. Just then, Shizuka entered the classroom. Noticing Makoto and Shinazuka together, she nervously walked over to them. Desperately trying to spark a conversation, she asked Makoto if he had changed his hairstyle because to her he looked kind of different. Makoto said no and asked why she thought that. Shizuka shrugged and said it was nothing major, just that he'd been acting more relaxed lately. She also mentioned she'd noticed how well he was along with Shinazuka and added that they looked really good together, almost like a couple. Then she casually remarked that it made her feel better about not confessing to him. But before things could get more awkward, Sidhu suddenly put Shizuka in a choke hold from behind to shut her up. He warned her to stop meddling in other people's business. Shinazuka, clearly ticked off, asked Shizuka why she thought they looked like a couple. Shizuka just giggled, patted Shinazuka's head and teased her, saying she didn't look intimidating at all in those glasses. Then, with a sly smirk, she dropped the bomb that she knew Makoto had invited Shinazuka over to his place alone. Sidhu immediately apologized for Shizuka's drunk anti-behavior and dragged her away, leaving behind a tsunami of awkward silence. Finally, Shinazuka broke it by saying she wasn't in the mood for light novels anymore and suggested they go shopping for Makoto's new place instead. Makoto mentioned he needed to buy a cup, and Shinazuka immediately guessed it was a coffee mug, because of course, he was Captain Jitterbeans. But Makoto corrected her, saying he actually wanted to buy the cup for her. That made Shinazuka go full-on cherry face. She said she'd be delighted to have one, but it really wasn't necessary. Makoto just smiled at her flustered reaction. After school, the two of them went shopping at the mall. Shinazuka was surprised at how quickly they wrapped things up and asked if they were forgetting anything. Makoto just nodded and asked again if she was really sure about not wanting a cup. Shinazuka insisted there were plenty at his grandfather's house already. Plus, she didn't see a reason to get one since she'd only be there to write, not like it was anything special. Makoto agreed, saying yeah, that made sense since they weren't even friends. That comment seemed to sting Shinazuka a little, but to brush it off, she just said they should hurry back home. Just then, Makoto felt a sudden urge to take a poop, so he excused himself to use the restroom, leaving Shinazuka waiting. Several hours passed, and since he wasn't yet back, Shinazuka started to grumble inwardly, wondering if he was actually giving birth in there or something. To pass time, she started reading his light novel on her phone, hoping he'd come back soon. But just then, some of her old classmates who used to torment her life spotted her and came over. Shinazuka froze in nervous shock when she saw them. They leaned close and asked if Shinazuka was waiting for a friend, but then they said that shouldn't be the case since she didn't have any friends. As Shinazuka fidgeted anxiously, they kept going, making snide remarks about her cringy stories and mocking her appearance. One of them even threatened to call another friend, Momo, so she could come and bully Shinazuka too. Suddenly, Makoto returned. He stepped between Shinazuka and the girls, telling her not to be shy about her stories, and then asked her to come home with him. The mean girls froze, caught off guard by how Jinwoo hot he was. Jealousy crept in as they stared at him, wondering if he was actually Shinazuka's boyfriend. As Makoto and Shinazuka started to leave, one of the girls, dripping with jealousy, tried to warn him about Shinazuka's horrible reputation. The rest joined in, calling her a weirdo who wrote weird novels, and begged Makoto to ditch her and come to karaoke with them instead. But Makoto just shot them and then warned them never to come close to Shinazuka again. He further warned that if they hurt his precious friend again, he'd never forgive them. That said, he took Shinazuka's hand and led her away. Shinazuka, touched by his words and actions, started to cry. But Makoto, trying to act tough, told her bad B********** don't cry. But then teased that even though he'd cried a lot himself when they threw rocks at him, but Shinazuka insisted she wasn't crying. But deep down, her heart was a mess. To cheer her up, Makoto handed her the cup he'd secretly bought for her, a cup with the logo of her favorite character, the one he had noticed her staring at in the shop. But then he sheepishly clarified that he hadn't been staring at her all the time or anything, so she didn't have to get mad. Shinazuka, smiling through her tears, held the cup closed and thanked him for the gift. Makoto told her to make up her mind to either smile or cry. She couldn't do both at once. For the first time, Shinazuka finally understood what her teacher had meant about meeting someone you could fully trust. She realized she could trust Makoto, and even if he betrayed her, it wouldn't matter. As she thought back to how he defended her, she teased him, saying he'd made a pretty funny face, too, back then. And with that, their chaotic, emotional day at the mall came to a truly wholesome close. Several days later, at Makoto's new crib, he and Shinazuka sat on the floor working on their novels. After a while, Makoto suggested they take a break and have some coffee, and Shinazuka agreed. Makoto went over to the shelf to grab the coffee mugs, and while doing so, he casually mentioned that he hadn't heard from Seiko in a while. It made him wonder if the talks with the publisher were going smoothly. Shinazuka replied that things always took time in publishing. She explained that they needed to figure out and refine a lot of things, and also find artists to handle the illustrations, so yeah, it would take a while. She added that he'd soon be busy with revision work anyway, so he might as well update his other projects while he still had the time. Makoto came back with the coffee, and still on the topic of publishing, asked what she thought of his romance story. Shinazuka deadpan, asked if he could even call that mess a romance novel. She complained that the scenes were just full of sudden dance breaks and random fights. Makoto accepted the criticism, since Shinazuka was a solid writer in the romance niche. But in his defense, he pointed out that he'd never had a girlfriend, so his romantic experience was just as non-existent as most of the viewers. Taken aback, Shinazuka claimed that she hadn't fallen in love either, and that everything she wrote was just her own delusions. Makoto was stunned. He couldn't believe it. He had always assumed she was a certified heartbreaker with a long list of body counts, writing straight from experience. The assumption flustered Shinazuka immediately. To dodge the heat, she quickly switched the topic and asked if Makoto had been preparing for the school trip happening in 3 days. Makoto asked if that was really necessary. Shinazuka snapped that it absolutely was. She went on to excitedly explain that he needed to pick out the right clothes and shoes to fit in perfectly. He also needed to map out the entire location to find the best route and get on all the good rides. She even mentioned, with sparkly eyes, that they'd added new popcorn flavors to the wagon and that she'd already made note of it. When Makoto still didn't see the point of all that excitement, Shinazuka yelled at him to get serious about the trip. If he didn't, she warned, he wouldn't be able to enjoy Destiny Land to its fullest. Then she proudly boasted that he should be grateful she was on the same team as him, because that meant he got the privilege of her figuring everything out for him. To show a little appreciation, Makoto told her they'd definitely have fun on the trip. Shinazuka, clearly satisfied, nodded with a smile. The next day at school, Shinazuka was still fired up about the trip, hunched over her phone while checking the map for the best route to follow. Makoto found himself watching her with curiosity. He hadn't seen this side of her before. Just then, as he tilted his head slightly, his eyes landed on Shizuka, Haruka, and Sidhu having a discussion across the hall. His gaze drifted in their direction, and for a brief moment, his eyes met Shizuka's. They both quickly looked away. Shinazuka noticed the exchange of glances and felt kind of jealous. Out of bitter amusement, she teased Makoto, saying that his childhood friend was a real hottie, unlike her, who just looked painfully plain. Makoto immediately disagreed with her self-deprecating remark, saying he didn't think that at all. The comment caught Shinazuka off guard, leaving her flustered and silent for a while. Hours later in class, Makoto leaned over and told Shinazuka he wanted her to check out his new romance novel. Shinazuka agreed, but after reading just the first page, she advised him that romance clearly wasn't his thing. The comment bruised Makoto's ego on the spot. Makoto, pretending to take it like a champ, joked that he was nowhere near as good as her. That flattery backfired, though, as Shinazuka instantly turned red and yelled at him, insisting she wasn't some kind of romance expert or anything. Sometime later at Makoto's place, Shinazuka read the full version of his so-called romance novel. After finishing it, she begged him, for the love of God, not to even think about posting it under his Nyanta name. She flat out told him that romance wasn't his strong suit, and he should just stick to his fantasy style. Even with his pride wounded, Makoto admitted that writing the story was both embarrassing and fun. Still, he was glad that Shinazuka could at least relate to it. Makoto's romance story followed the tale of a hero and heroine, both betrayed by the people around them and hunted by their own countries, until fate brought them together. But as he read the story out loud, Makoto slowly came to the shocking realization that, without even meaning to, he had written the life story of both himself and Shinazuka. Embarrassed, he immediately said he'd trash the story, but Shinazuka objected. She said she actually found it interesting and suggested he could release it as a breather, just something different from his usual work. Makoto agreed, but this time, he decided to carefully foster and develop the story, giving it the attention it deserved. Time flew by quickly, and before they knew it, evening had already rolled around. Realizing how late it had gotten, Shinazuka immediately said she needed to head home before it got too dark. She also remembered they hadn't prepared dinner, so she planned to stop by the convenience store on her way back. But upon hearing that, Makoto mustered up the courage to suggest they have dinner together instead. Though a second later, he remembered that Seiko, her older sister, might get worried if she came home late. Shinazuka, however, pointed out that it wouldn't be a problem. Seiko actually wanted her to get some writing done here anyway. Still, she hesitated, saying she didn't want to bother him. Makoto assured her it'd be fine and suggested they treat it like a pre-trip party for the school excursion the next day. That convinced Shinazuka, and she agreed on the condition that she helped with the cooking. Once they were in the kitchen, things quickly took a turn. Shinazuka absolutely butchered the vegetables like a maniac. Makoto stared at the chaos in silent horror. Then it hit him. She was just like most Gen Zs, who probably couldn't boil water, even if their life depended on it. He asked her to clean up the mess she made on the table, and while she did that, he used the opportunity to salvage dinner and whip up something actually edible. With the food ready, Shinazuka took a bite, and her eyes lit up. She really enjoyed it. Feeling a little guilty, she offered to wash the dishes since she had been completely useless when it came to cooking. When Makoto apologized for making her do that, Shinazuka waved it off and told him to focus on the school trip tomorrow instead. She reminded him to memorize the map so they could navigate the park easily. She was beyond excited, thinking about all the rides, characters, and snacks she wanted to check out. She was so pumped, she didn't think she'd even be able to sleep that night. Makoto, however, warned her to get proper rest if she really wanted to enjoy the trip to the fullest. As he watched her ramble on about her excitement, Makoto couldn't help but wonder if spending time like this, talking, laughing, and just being merry, was the real essence of friendship. On the day of the school trip, Makoto felt oddly nostalgic. He thought back to all his former school trips, and how every single one had been a solo experience. No one ever talked to him. In fact, most students would have rather chatted with a wall than even look his way. He'd always been ignored during bus games and group activities. It got so bad that even his assigned seatmate once brought a portable seat just to sit somewhere else. Makoto had no fond memories of those trips. Not a single one. But fast forward now, he wondered if things would be any different. That morning by a little past 6, Makoto arrived at Shinizuka's home. To his surprise, she was already up, standing outside chatting with her mom. Shinizuka's mother lit up the moment she saw him. Clearly delighted, she greeted him warmly and assumed right away that he must be her daughter's boyfriend. Shinizuka, trying to stay calm, brushed it off and quickly told her mom they were leaving. Makoto, flustered by the whole situation, quietly stepped forward. As Shinizuka walked over to meet him, he apologized for showing up so early. Meanwhile, her mom remained at the doorway, still beaming like an overly proud anime mom. Shinizuka, clearly embarrassed by her mother's antics, sighed and finally introduced Makoto properly. Her mom greeted him again, this time even sweeter, and casually remarked that Shinizuka had mentioned him quite a lot. That comment sent Shinizuka into full panic mode. She immediately told her mom to go back inside before things got any more embarrassing. And just like that, the two of them took off, heading toward the station. On the way, Makoto noticed that Shinizuka was wearing a beautiful dress. It caught his eye instantly, and after seeing how good it looked on her, he brought it up. When Shinizuka said she had dressed up specially for the occasion, Makoto blushed a little before softly muttering that it suited her perfectly, and that she looked really cute in it. Shinizuka's face went full beet red at the compliment, but she tried to play it cool again by pointing out that it was Makoto's first time ever complimenting her. Makoto, now equally flustered, brushed it off by saying he was just talking to himself. He quickly changed the topic, suggesting they just focus on enjoying the trip. Soon after they got on the train, and after a short ride, arrived at Kiyama Station. Shinizuka expressed her surprise at how quickly they'd arrived. Makoto smiled and said time really flew by when they were together talking about light novels. Once they got off the train, they stopped to decide what to do next. The plan was to meet up with the rest of their group in the underground alley, but since they had arrived early, they had some spare time to waste. Shinizuka suggested they hang out a bit and explore the nearby shops. Makoto pointed out that most of them were still closed, but they agreed to check the place out anyway. Just as they were about to start wandering, they unexpectedly ran into their teacher. The MILF was pleasantly surprised to see both of them together like some casual couple. She gave them a teasing smile and asked if the two of them were getting along well. Makoto, finally accepting the obvious, replied that they had actually become good friends. The teacher seemed genuinely glad to hear it. As she walked away, she told them to have fun and to make some great memories together. As the teacher walked away, Shinizuka turned to Makoto and admitted, rather honestly, that she never thought she'd end up becoming friends with a gloomy loser like him. Makoto clapped back instantly, saying he didn't see himself getting along with a scary-eyed Yankee either. Makoto explained that back then, he just couldn't bring himself to trust people since he didn't think anyone could be a real G to him anyways. Shinizuka hesitated before asking if he still felt that way even now, but as soon as the question left her lips, she realized how awkward it sounded and tried to brush it off. Makoto, however, didn't ignore it. He answered honestly, saying that even now, he still couldn't trust anyone unconditionally. But then, after a moment of thought, he added that he couldn't betray his friends either, and because of that, he was fine with trusting someone like her. The answer took Shinizuka by surprise. She quietly admitted that she felt the same way, that she was fine trusting him too. The two of them, after all, were similar in the sense that neither had much confidence in themselves. Realizing the conversation was getting dangerously embarrassing, Shinizuka quickly changed the subject. She pointed toward a nearby mucky shop and said she wanted to check it out. Makoto agreed, and as they walked closer, he asked her why she was so obsessed with the mouse thing. Shinizuka immediately corrected him. She said it wasn't just a mouse, it was Mucky, the chinchilla mascot of her favorite band, Destiny. When Makoto asked how many Muckies existed or how many costumes they had for it, Shinizuka quickly explained that there was only one Mucky, she said, and that one was the real deal. She then declared that she was definitely getting a picture with Mucky today. But just then, a new idea popped into her head. Her cheeks turned pink, and she asked if Makoto would take a picture with her now, since they were together anyway. Makoto agreed, saying it was a good idea. It would be a memory they'd hold on to, something to stay in their hearts forever. With that, the two of them got ready to take a picture together in front of the Mucky-themed shop window. But just before they could take the photo, Makoto asked whose smartphone they'd be using and suggested they use his, and he could send the picture to her later. Shinizuka's face immediately brightened at the fact that he also wanted to keep the photo, so she proposed they take it using both their phones. She pulled out her phone and switched to the selfie camera. As they both got into position, Shinizuka noticed there was a bit of distance between them. They didn't fit into the frame properly. She told Makoto to move closer. Makoto inched in a little, but it still wasn't enough. She told him to come even closer. Makoto moved in again, still hesitant, but Shinizuka had had enough of the spacing issue. Without warning, she grabbed the risless goat by the shoulder and yanked him closer to her. Makoto, flustered, admitted that this was his first time doing something like this. Shinizuka said it was the same for her too. She got ready to set the timer, but noticed Makoto was making a full-on virgin face, so she asked him to fix it ASAP. After some adjusting, she turned on the timer, and the two of them finally snapped the selfie. When they looked at the picture, Shinizuka burst out laughing, realizing both of them looked ridiculously tense. She then pointed out that this was officially their first photo together, a new page in the book of their memories. Excited by the thought, she suggested they fill that book with tons more pictures today. Makoto, already feeling overwhelmed, shyly begged her to go easy on him. Following their little tour around, Makoto and Shinizuka made their way to where the rest of the students had gathered. But upon arriving, Shinizuka looked visibly uneasy, like she wasn't feeling the vibe. Makoto noticed her expression and asked what was wrong. He even joked if her foul mood had anything to do with the chapter he posted earlier that day being a bit boring. Shinizuka shook her head and told him it wasn't that. She explained that she just wasn't vibing with the whole environment. Makoto, trying to lift the mood, told her that they'd be having a lot of fun today. His optimism managed to pull a small smile from her, and she agreed. Shortly after, Shinizuka admitted what was really bothering her. It was being around so many students. The crowd made her uncomfortable. Makoto considered it and agreed that it was a bit much. Then, noticing the teacher still wasn't around, he suggested they pass the time by reading some light novel chapters. As he pulled out his phone, he casually asked if Shinizuka had ever heard of an author named Pagyuko. She looked a little confused, but before she could reply, the teacher finally arrived and called everyone over. The teacher went through the call and laid out how the trip would go. According to her, they'd be staying at the venue until 4 p.m., after which they'd receive a notice to return and gather at the original meetup spot. She also informed them that they'd be allowed to explore Destiny Land before wrapping up the day. After the short announcement, the teacher dismissed the students, giving them the freedom to enjoy the park. Shinizuka lit up with excitement and immediately grabbed Makoto, urging him to hurry and head over to Destiny Land with her. She was so hyped that she broke into a full sprint, which instantly worried Makoto. He was sure she was going to trip and faceplant at any second. But thankfully, Shinizuka managed to control herself and skidded to a stop before disaster struck. She turned back and assured Makoto that she'd be fine, so he didn't need to worry. Upon entering the fun park, Makoto reminded Shinizuka that they needed to get their tickets first. Shinizuka took out her phone to check the to-do list she had prepared for the day. But just then, she spotted one of her other favorite mascot characters, Takai, posing nearby. The temptation to run over and take a picture with the adorable fluffball was strong. Still, she hesitated, remembering the plan. Makoto, noticing her dilemma, agreed they should stick to the plan and get the tickets first. But he also added that what really mattered was doing what they wanted and just enjoying themselves. That settled it. They both decided to go ahead and take a selfie with Takai the mascot. Afterward, the real fun began. They went on several rides, starting with the roller coaster. Makoto ended up gripping the handlebar like his life depended on it, shivering like a schoolgirl during a ghost story, while Shinizuka was loving every second of the adrenaline rush. They also had some good food together, laughing, chatting, and sharing snacks. But more importantly, Shinizuka was visibly enjoying every moment. Later, they stopped by a souvenir store and found a section selling Takai headpieces. Shinizuka immediately wanted Makoto to put one on. Makoto looked at the headband like it was a trap and said it was way too embarrassing. But Shinizuka reassured him that everyone was doing it. After a brief inner battle, Makoto gave in and put it on. He felt ridiculous. But to his surprise, Shinizuka told him he looked really cool in it. Still unconvinced, Makoto grumbled about how dumb he probably looked. Shinizuka told him it was fine. He could take it off if he really wanted to. She then proudly showed off her own headpiece, which had long bunny ears. She said she thought it looked really beautiful. When she asked Makoto what he thought about her bunny ears, Makoto practically turned red on the spot. Embarrassed, he turned his back to her and muttered that it looked great. But Shinazuka wasn't buying it. She narrowed her eyes and called him out, demanding that he look her in the face and say it properly. As the two continued bantering, Shinazuka suddenly noticed a little girl sitting alone in the corner, quietly crying. Makoto noticed her pause and asked what she was looking at. Shinazuka replied with a quick "It's nothing," but her eyes remained locked on the child. After a few more seconds, she couldn't take it anymore. Without saying much, she walked over toward the girl, with Makoto following behind. As they got closer, Shinazuka gently asked the girl if she had gotten separated from her friends. But the girl instantly went on the defensive. With a hostile tone and a frown, she snapped back that she wasn't lost. It was then that Shinazuka and Makoto looked around and realized what was actually happening. The girl wasn't lost. She was being teased and bullied by 3 of her classmates. Clearly irritated by their presence, the girl snapped at them, yelling what the heck they wanted from her, and once again emphasized that she wasn't lost. Trying to calm the situation, Shinazuka gently introduced herself and Makoto, explaining that they were on a school trip. She then asked the girl for her name. The girl remained defensive at first, but once she cooled down a bit, she introduced herself as Chisa, a junior student. Then with a glare, she told them to leave her alone. But Shinazuka wasn't backing off so easily. She asked if Chisa had been ditched by those other girls. Chisa's reply came cold and sharp, saying it was none of her business. She went on to say that she didn't care about those idiotic girls anyway, and that there was no way she could enjoy Destiny Land surrounded by jealous girls like them. That comment caught both Shinazuka and Makoto off guard. Still, Shinazuka, touched by the emotion behind it, tried to lift the mood. Without warning, she took off her bunny ears and placed them on Chisa's head, startling her. Shinazuka let out a soft laugh and told her she looked beautiful in them. Then she turned to Makoto and asked if he agreed. Chisa, clearly overwhelmed by the gesture, immediately took off the bunny ears and warned Shinazuka not to make fun of her. But Shinazuka didn't budge. She simply smiled and thought to herself that if Chisa could still cry when she's hurt, then maybe she could still be fixed unlike them. To cheer her up again, Shinazuka told Chisa that sulking in a fun place like this was just a waste of time. She offered to take her to grab a drink instead. Chisa, a little hesitant, agreed. Eventually, the 3 of them made their way to a stand and got something to drink. After a few quiet sips, Chisa turned to Shinazuka and softly thanked her. Suddenly, a loud growl echoed from Chisa's stomach, catching her off guard and making her instantly embarrassed. Shinazuka smiled and told her there was nothing to be embarrassed about. It was normal, besides it was already lunchtime. Without hesitation, she grabbed Chisa's hand and told her they were going for lunch. Chisa, surprised, tried to resist a bit and asked where she was being taken. Shinazuka answered casually, saying it was lunch, obviously. Meanwhile, Makoto quietly watched Shinazuka's interaction with Chisa and thought about how Shinazuka wasn't really good at inviting anyone to do anything. Yet somehow, she always made people follow her anyway. Will Makoto and Shinazuka finally be able to live a normal school life free from rumors and judgment? Comment Broken Bonds if you're excited to see what happens next in Part 2.